afternoon, all. First of all, I thank the witnesses who are joining us today over Zoom, and I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 16 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, March 1st, 2022, the committee is meeting on quantum computing. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room or remotely using the Zoom application, and I think most of us are here today. You know what the rules are in place, so behave accordingly. Before beginning with the witnesses who are with us today, I would just like to solve a little issue for the committee. We have two budgets to adopt, one on quantum computing and the other on critical minerals. This would allow the clerk to spend the money. Do I have unanimous consent of the committee to approve both budgets on those studies? Thank you very much. So without further ado, we have with us today, indeed, on quantum computing, Dr. Gilles Brassard, Professor, Department of Computer Science and Operations Research, University of Montreal. Thank you for being here. Ms. Shohini Ghosh, Professor, Wilfrid Laurier University. Ms. Kimberly Hall, Dr. Kimberly Hall, Professor of Physics, Department of Physics and Atmospheric Science, Dalhousie University. Thank you for being with us. We have from the Canadian Association of Radiologists, Dr. Jaron Chong, Artificial Intelligence Standing Committee. From Prima Québec, Marie-Pierre Hyperciel, President and Chief Executive Officer. And finally, Québec Quantique, Olivier Gagnon-Gordio, Executive Director. So thank you for being with us. And now, without further ado, for about 5 minutes each, I'll begin with Dr. Brassard. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Is it better in English?
Donc, sentez-vous bien?
Really, Dr. Brassard, we have interpretation, so feel free to speak the language of Molière or Shakespeare as you wish. Very well. So, I'm Gilles Brassard from the University of Montreal.
Credentials, so that you know about me a little bit. I was involved in quantum informatique quantique in the late 1970s already. So I am the earliest person in Canada working on this topic. And I invented with Charles Bennett of IBM quantum cryptography in the early 1980s and quantum teleportation. So this being said, my position about quantum information science, informatique quantique, is that it indeed should be a priority of the government for funding and research and development. This is a golden opportunity for Canada to remain at the top because, again, I was there with Charlie Bennett when there was essentially no one else in the world doing this type of research. And therefore, Canada was, from the start, heading the world in this discipline. Now, I want to tell you why it's so important to develop quantum information in all of its manifestations. One is that quantum computing poses a very significant threat to security, as I'm sure you've heard already, but I will say it again. Quantum computers, if and when, there's no if, when they are built, when we finally have a full-scale quantum computer, as opposed to the toys that are currently available, and I say that even though these are fantastic technological feats, but at the moment they cannot really do anything useful that we would not do classically. But this is only a matter of time. When full-scale quantum computers become available, then all the security on which the internet is based, and not only the internet, but essentially all the cryptographic infrastructure that on which we rely will collapse. And because of an algorithm invented by Peter Shor that essentially breaks essentially all the cryptography that is currently used on the internet. Let me be more precise, for key establishment. Once a key is established, then it is used with more conventional systems, which are not so much threatened by quantum computing, but the key establishment is. And the reason why this is so serious is that whenever this happens, it's not that secure communication will no longer be possible. It is that all past communications become vulnerable, because nothing prevents what we call the harvest now and decrypt later strategy, which consists in just taking down all the information that goes on the internet and storing it, even though the encryption cannot be broken yet. And when a quantum computer comes along, then you can just go back, take all of that from your disks and decrypt retroactively. In other words, everything that's been sent on the internet since essentially the beginning of times will become an open book when a quantum computer is available. And therefore, there's no way to try to protect the past. The past is gone forever. Forget about it. But we can still hope to protect the future. And this can only be done if we realize the importance of quantum secure communication. Now, there are two ways to do that. One is to use classical, ordinary cryptography and hope that it's secure against quantum computing, which we will never be able to prove. All we know is that the currently used systems are vulnerable, and some new systems are being developed, which may be secure, but we will not be able to prove that. Or you can use quantum cryptography. Of course, I have vested interest in quantum cryptography, having invented it, but I have no commercial interest. And quantum cryptography is an alternative in which, instead of using mathematics, we use physics to protect information in a way that is provably unconditionally secure, regardless of the eavesdropper's computing power and technological sophistication. So quantum cryptography is secure even against a quantum computer, and should be considered very seriously. At the moment, China is deploying a large-scale quantum cryptographic networks. They already have a network that links Beijing to Shanghai, which is used for real already, as well as satellite that they launched to experiment with long-distance space quantum cryptography. So quantum crypto is very seriously considered in China, also to a lesser extent, but quite a bit in Europe, much less in North America, and really not very much at all in the United States. I think Canada should get back the lead on this topic to secure communication, because our society needs it. Now, quantum computers can also be used for good to do all kinds of wonderful things, like develop new medication, but that's another story. And my time is up, so I'll stop here.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Brassard.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brassard. And I give the floor now to Ms. Ghosh, Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Shohini Ghosh, and I have suffered my whole life from insatiable curiosity about how the universe works. In my office hangs a poster which says, "There is no cure for curiosity." That curiosity inevitably led me to the strange quantum world. And now, as a professor of physics and computer science at Wilfrid Laurier University, I lead a diverse research team exploring quantum computing. And I get to dream about teleportation. Thank you, Professor Brassard, for inventing it. And I dream about how it can be used in a future quantum internet. Truly, I feel like Alice in Quantum Wonderland. My team was the first to observe a connection between chaos theory and quantum entanglement. That's a phenomenon called the quantum butterfly effect. I also hold a TED Senior Fellowship, which has given me a global platform. If you have 10 minutes to spare, I invite you all to view my TED Talk on quantum computing, which is the most viewed TED Talk on this topic. I'm a good example of the Canadian connected quantum ecosystem in action. Although I'm not based at a major research university, I've worked with researchers in the quantum hubs in Calgary and in Waterloo, and I have ongoing collaborations with colleagues at Ryerson and in industry. My fellow researchers have already given you a sense of the huge potential for quantum technologies to impact multiple sectors. That brings with it opportunities as well as challenges for Canada. And the most pressing, as you have heard, by far, is the question of data security. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more during the Q&A session, but for now, I'd like to focus my remarks on 3 areas: education, collaboration, and communication. On the education side, even if every physics major in Canada were to choose a career in quantum computing, it would probably not meet the future workforce needs of the sector. Therefore, it is critical to develop talent from adjacent fields. You don't need a PhD in physics to have a career in quantum tech. In fact, quantum computing sits at the intersection of physics, computer science, mathematics, chemistry, engineering, and even biology. For example, for the past decade, I have been teaching a very successful undergraduate course on quantum computing for all science majors, and it does not require any prior knowledge of quantum mechanics. Now, similar courses are offered in other institutions. So a structured effort to build a unique, broad-based curriculum that provides multiple pathways to quantum careers is needed. This could make the Canadian workforce agile and attract the best talent from elsewhere. And this kind of an effort would bring dividends regardless of the success or failure of a particular quantum technology. Furthermore, there's a huge untapped pool of talent right here in Canada and around the world. Women, gender minorities, and people of color remain underrepresented in science disciplines, particularly in physics, where 1 in 5 students is a woman. As of the last count, the number of Black or Indigenous women professors in physics in Canada was 0. I hold one of 5 chairs in Canada for women in science and engineering funded by NSERC, and the 5 chairholders work together to increase the participation of women in STEM fields. I'm also the first Canadian representative to serve on the working group on women in physics of the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics, where the Waterloo Charter on Diversity and Inclusion that was launched here in Canada was recently ratified. And in 2019, I was the first person of color to be president of the Canadian Association of Physicists. And I've been working to build a more diverse and inclusive physics community in Canada. I really believe that the quantum revolution provides a unique opportunity for Canada to be a leader in building excellence through inclusion in this sector. We know how to build community in Canada, and we can show the world how to do it. This too would bring dividends regardless of the particular quantum technology being explored. Furthermore, ethics in AI has become an important and growing conversation, but quantum ethics is barely discussed. That seems to me a major gap that needs to be addressed. The other thing I want to say is that it's a challenge to try to predict where a new technology will be used, what the applications will be. But that's why a quantum ecosystem must include not just hardware and software engineers in quantum, but also experts in health, finance, energy, ethics, to identify industry-specific needs and realistic quantum solutions. Interdisciplinary expertise and training will therefore be critical. And as a final point, I want to note that there's a great public interest and enthusiasm for quantum computing and a desire to know more. The Perimeter Institute in Waterloo, where I'm an affiliate, has offered many public lectures on the topic, and they all sell out in minutes. My own online talks on quantum have received over 5 million views. Now more than ever, it's clear that scientific literacy and public engagement play a key role in future societal progress. And Canadian quantum scientists are already viewed as thought leaders, so they can play a major role in inspiring curious minds. They say that curiosity killed the cat, but a quantum Schrodinger's cat is never really dead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We'll now move to Professor Hall for 5 minutes.
It'll be hard to follow that. My name is Kimberly Hall. I've been a professor of physics at Dalhousie University for the past 18 years. My research throughout my career has focused on various areas of quantum technology, ranging from spin-based electronics to quantum spectroscopy on energy materials and the development of what are called quantum emitters. What we do in my group is to use specialized lasers, very short laser pulses that we engineer to study how to control these systems optimally, applied, for example, to quantum state initialization or quantum simulation using optical control of solid-state semiconductor qubit systems. So I have benefited from the significant early investments that Canada has made in the quantum area, like Discovery, CFI, Canada Research Chairs. I've had involvement with industry through contracts awarded via the offset programs with Lockheed Martin and Rockwell Collins. And one of my graduate students started a company several years ago that applies some of the quantum science we have learned to solar cell technology. So I'm coming from Dalhousie University. Dal is a U15 school. It has strengths in areas such as ocean science and energy generation and storage. In the quantum area, we have a lot of room to grow. I'm one of only 3 faculty members focused on this area. The other 2, Peter Sellinger and Julian Ross, work in a very different area from mine, quantum algorithm development. So along with Peter and Julian, I'm an example of one of the very large number of quantum researchers in Canada that are leading internationally in their fields, but are not located at one of the 3 main hub institutions in the Canadian quantum space. So in terms of comments, it has been said many times already that the most important role of the strategy is to support the full quantum ecosystem. In doing so, we need to keep in mind that fundamental research and commercial innovation are much more tightly linked in the quantum area than in any other field. This is because applications are being developed in lockstep with the development of an understanding of the basic physics behind them. Companies are being formed around concepts that are promising but not well defined yet in some cases, and that are fundamentally evolving as the science evolves. So in funding this ecosystem, it's essential to support collaborations between the academic and industrial sectors. But there are many crucial areas of quantum science that have a great potential for future innovation, but for which the research is not yet at a stage where direct ties to industry make sense. And these must be supported as well. So I thought I would give an example. So we are discovering and developing, along with groups around the world right now, new 2-dimensional materials. So these are single atomic layers of a material in which it turns out that simply stretching this very thin layer over a very small pillar creates what's called a quantum emitter, a source of single photons, which are essential in many areas of quantum technology. And the interesting thing is that you can actually deposit this layer of atoms using something quite similar to Scotch tape. This means that we can create an entire photonic circuit using the technology we have now and introduce quantum functionality by simply peeling and sticking these layers on top. This may turn out to be a crucial step needed to get quantum photonic circuits to the commercial stage, but at this point, we're just peeling and sticking different kinds of materials for the first time and trying to figure out why these emitters form. So it's an example of something that's very promising, but it's clearly not ready to be spun off into a company. Another point I want to make is that the more excellent scientists and researchers we have tackling this field in Canada, the more excellent ideas, the more companies, the more products we are going to produce as a country. 2 heads are better than 1, and we need many more heads than 2. Great ideas can come from anywhere in the country. They can come from small institutions or large ones. They can come from people of many different cultures and visibly distinct groups. A healthy quantum ecosystem must have a broad base to prepare us for the next 20 years of innovation, and the funding landscape must support this broad base. So in relation to this, it is true that we are investing less as a country in quantum than some other countries. And so there's been considerable discussion in these meetings of the need to spend the funds strategically. No matter what amount of funding you start with, you must dedicate some of it to supporting the broad base, or the ecosystem won't be healthy and we will all lose in the long term. So we must do better at this. The key is to have open competitions where excellence is the metric and to avoid the artificial barriers that can come into play from the structure of the funding program that we choose. For instance, I believe that a quantum supplement to discovery grants would reach excellent researchers within a much broader range of contexts than some of the other programs that have been explicitly highlighted in the strategy. And this would also increase the number of quantum trainees. And the NRC challenge programs are also quite good. And finally, I just wanted to say that it is fantastic that these meetings are happening and that you will all have a chance to share what you have learned here with your constituents. It is crucial that the public, if not understanding how quantum tech works, at least understands why it's important to invest in. And this is not easy because people think they already have fast computers. And by the time you explain what an MP hard problem is, many of those that are not in math and science will have lost interest. It is much easier to remember examples like magnetic field sensors that will mean that when you go get an MRI, you don't have to get into a claustrophobic chamber that takes up half a room as well as a lot of energy, or like the gravitational sensors that may allow us to see if a culvert is blocked without digging up the ground, or the photonic sensors that enable us to see around corners. We all know that big money is being invested in this area because of national security, not because of these other applications, but that is not the main consideration when it comes to effective outreach. The point is, whatever words you choose to describe the value of quantum, please do spread those words widely.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move to Mr. Chung for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, fellow panelists, my name is Dr. Jaron Chong. I'm the chair of the Canadian Association of Radiologists Standing Committee on Artificial Intelligence. I'm also an assistant professor of radiology at Western University here in London, Ontario, and a body imager at Victoria Hospital. The CAR represents Canadian radiologists, representing almost 2,900 members who provide medical imaging for millions of patients across Canada. Radiology is at the forefront of technological innovation in medicine, relying heavily on the contributions and developments of advanced technologies to enhance patient care. Now, these breakthroughs in imaging technology and research have led to almost an exponential growth of imaging data over the past few decades, which had then been applied back to healthcare questions and workflows, and particularly most recently in the domain of artificial intelligence. In 2017, the CAR established a standing committee on AI to deliberate on the practice, policy, and patient care issues related to the implementation of AI in medical imaging. And through a series of highly cited white papers, contributions to scientific forums, engagement with policymakers in Canada and abroad, the CAR has been a leader in the international conversation about AI. Now, I say all this and realize this is a session on quantum computing, and I'm not an expert on mechanics or computing in that way. What I do represent, however, is what we hope to be one of the ultimate endpoint applications of quantum computing, as particularly it relates to AI to help optimize healthcare and medical imaging. Certainly from the healthcare perspective, quantum computing may not solve necessarily new classes of problems that are not currently tackled right now of conventional computing, but they may vastly accelerate the computational speeds of our most NP-hard, difficult training projects, experiments, and they greatly expand the size and scope of clinical problems that we tackle. And we do see that conventional digital computing and quantum are mutually complementary and will almost certainly coexist for a very long time. But what we're most excited about is that we expect that the speed at which we can train algorithms will improve by orders of magnitude. So imagine training a neural network to detect lung cancer on a CT scan in minutes instead of days or months, or as was previously mentioned, developing a novel chemotherapy molecule for mass production in simulation as opposed to years and years of lab experimentation. If there's one lesson that radiology has learned about AI in the past 5 years, is actually that the computation, the algorithms, they actually can change by the year and by the week, but the data sets that are being used to train those algorithms are a much longer term investment. So the careful curation of data sets remain useful in 2017 to 2022 and beyond. And regardless of whether you're thinking about conventional or quantum computing, the amount of curated labeled data harnessed to optimize all these patient outcomes, ensure appropriate care, and enhance the efficiency of the entire system is very much a garbage in, garbage out metaphor. So our current work in AI right now is hindered sometimes more so by the amount of time it takes to clean and curate good data than it is necessarily by the computational capacity as well. As you make a metaphor, a faster car doesn't get you there faster if your roads are still full of potholes. So what we need to ask ourselves right now are what long-term policies and investments in better data today will position Canada to be creative, competent, and competitive for our healthcare AI needs of tomorrow and for quantum AI tomorrow as well. What we felt was that during the last AI revolution, investments in centers of excellence and basic science enabled Canada to play an international leadership role that was vastly disproportionate to our size and population. And the real challenge is maintaining our competitive edge and retaining the benefits of our investments as these innovations are applied to various sectors. We've often seen that we invest in the short term, on a cyclic manner, but the downstream benefits of those investments were oftentimes difficult to fully realize for Canadians on a population level over the long term. From a healthcare perspective, we have to accept the very realistic probability that the majority of healthcare AI used on Canadian patients will not have been developed or trained on Canadian data. And if this is the case, are we prepared to accept the consequences of that, of imported biases, of failure to perform or failure to generalize, and even the economic significance of importing, not necessarily exporting applications? And so in a post-quantum computing landscape, we would expect that the strengths and the weaknesses of data infrastructure is magnified. Those who have the pipelines will run faster, those who do not will fall behind, or perhaps find themselves buying from another. So if you are a decision maker, what we want you to know is that we still think that there's a dramatic need for investments in digitization and data collection. We need to ensure that the data we are collecting is good data that meets our current and future needs. And we need to improve our data infrastructure to facilitate data sharing, to empower investigators while also safeguarding the rights of patients and privacy. We do need to continually invest in the basic sciences and fundamental research that will help make the promise of quantum computing in healthcare and real-world applications less of a far-off proposition. We've seen that with earlier efforts to advance AI, that Canada has definitely the talent and the technical know-how to lead in this field and in many others. What will make a difference for Canadian patients in the healthcare system is if we can find a way to incentivize innovators to develop and implement their technology here at home. Welcome any questions you may have and look forward to the hopefully very interesting discussion coming up next. Thank you very much.
Un grand merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chong, and I'll now give the floor to Ms. Iperciel. Chairman Lightbound, Vice Chairs of the committee, thank you for this invitation. I'm a director of Prima Quebec, the Advanced Materials Research and Innovation Cluster.
Research group. There are 9 in Quebec in different sectors mandated by the Quebec government to facilitate and support the advanced material ecosystem through collaborative innovation. Nous faisons donc
We bridge the gap between the research community and industry by promoting collaborative innovation. In other words, we promote research-industry relations, we support the development of projects, and are able to finance them afterwards. In concrete terms, these projects will allow companies to benefit from research expertise to innovate, be more competitive, and above all, to stand out in the market. Over the past 5 years, we have supported more than 90 projects with a total value of $82 million, involving more than 190 industrial partners and 26 research partners, and which have trained more than 120 master's students and more than 275 PhDs and postdoctoral fellows, who constitute, as you know, the highly qualified personnel who will be very useful to the industry. So we have 8 projects over the last few years, and that will allow us to train talent.
Of the University of Sherbrooke, whom you heard on March 25th, made the link between quantum and advanced materials. Let me say a few words about advanced materials, which play a strategic role in all economic sectors. Advanced materials are new or significantly improved materials that provide a significant performance advantage, physical or functional, over conventional materials. Par performance physique, on pense à
By physical performance, we mean materials that provide better electrical or thermal conductivity, materials that have magnetic properties. By functional performance, we are thinking of hydrophobic or biodegradable coatings, self-repairing materials, and also intelligent materials. In parallel, the role of advanced equipment for the development of advanced materials must be emphasized, as they play a decisive role in the innovation capacity of SMEs. The advanced materials sectors is mainly made up of innovative SMEs, which, although active in research and development, do not always have the necessary internal resources to carry out characterization tests, material synthesis, surface treatment, or scaling up. As a result, access to equipment and associated expertise is essential to validate the transition from technology to innovation and thus help companies access different markets. And finally, with respect to this will be incredibly important to the contact sector.
Focus. Quantum is seen as an enabling force and driver in the discovery and development of new materials, processes that integrate materials, or in the development of equipment for their production or characterization. Simply put, quantum accelerates simulation and will allow us to combine all kinds of properties and functionalities that we want to obtain, and this more quickly. Les grands joueurs.
The major industrial players, especially those whose applications and products rely on a mastery of simulation, manufacturing, and characterization of new materials, must, in order to continue to meet the needs of their customers, invest in modeling. in the development of new materials and in the optimization of the processes to implement these materials. It will nevertheless be necessary to make these industrial players more aware of what quantum technology can offer. And I would be very pleased to answer your questions now.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Mr. Gagnon-Gordillo. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. My name is Olivier Gardon-Gordillo, and I'm in charge of the Quebec Quantique Initiative, whose mission is to make quantum sciences technologies a lever for economic and social development in Quebec.
The original and basic idea is to catalyze and ensure concerted action among local players and to ensure that the Quebec ecosystem gets to shine outside of our province with a collective brand, making it easier to connect with companies, investors, researchers, and talent interested in collaborating with actors from our ecosystem. Today, I'll focus on two main topics that I believe to be of interest for the Canadian National Quantum Strategy, and I'll share some examples of what Quebec is doing in line with these topics. So one, I'll talk about talent development, retention, and attraction. It's been a much discussed topic lately. And two, the adoption of quantum technologies from industry. But first, let's start with two examples of current initiatives in Quebec that do address these topics. The first example is Sherbrooke Quantique, which was announced earlier in February. So the recent announcement of the Sherbrooke Quantum Innovation Hub is a great example of an initiative that needs to be supported by the federal government. The hub in itself is a $435 million project, out of which $131 million is injected directly by the Quebec government to support 13 projects within that hub. And that includes the purchase of an IBM quantum computer, which is the fourth outside of the US. This hub will facilitate the creation of new quantum startups while facilitating multi-level collaboration between vocational institutions, colleges, and the university, where problem-based learning and the project-based approach will serve as a reference framework for developing innovative learning situations. This initiative will play a key role in attracting and retaining talent in companies while boosting direct investments from abroad. Now, the second example here is Quebec Quantique, which I'm the lead of. This initiative came to life to address, among others, the topics that I cover here today, but on a provincial level. Note that we're more than willing to collaborate with the rest of Canada to become more cohesive with international collaborations. Some initiatives, for example, that we're involved with are missions abroad. We were recently in New York with a Quebec mission, and we're about to go to Europe along with the federal mission in Germany, and we'll do a Quebec mission this spring as well in France and the Netherlands. We're organizing a big quantum hackathon in June 2022 that aims to bridge or at least explore the gap between technical and business solution. It's open to everyone in Canada, and similar editions will take place in Chicago and in France with QuantX. We also offered training to Quebec delegation representatives and provided communication tools for them to promote the sector abroad. We're willing to do the same for Canadian embassies. Quebec Quantique offers a common brand and central communication hub for basic educational information, news, events, and even open positions in Quebec in the sector. Now on to my first topic, talent. The true quantum advantage lies in the talent available within an ecosystem. We need to make sure that we develop, retain, and attract talented individuals to the quantum sector in Canada. Currently, although universities are doing a great job at training tomorrow's workforce in this field, a lot of that talent doesn't stay in Canada and often leaves for bigger markets that offer more interesting conditions. The federal government can help in sponsoring programs to de-risk the path towards entrepreneurship for students in this sector. It would also play a double duty in also supporting the creation of more startups in the sector. Le gouvernement du Canada a un taux.
Canada's government has a high rate of turning down visas for priority markets, particularly from Francophone Africa. The policies and immigration process must be adapted to become better facilitators. The community of science and technology and quantum area has a flagrant lack of that needs to be filled.
Needs to be seen in a broader spectrum as it involves people, such as myself, that do not have an academic background related to quantum sciences, but that can bring value to the sector. Companies and ecosystems won't be able to thrive solely on PhDs, and an effort to increase the basic knowledge of business leaders is essential to speed up the adoption of quantum technologies by industries. Now on to my second topic. To attract companies in starting quantum-related projects, it would be necessary to highlight the possible applications and industries that could benefit from participating in this field. Use cases with a market pull approach rather than a tech push approach is a must in attracting companies to the sector. And beyond the business leaders, companies and potential users need employees who can understand what quantum can actually mean to them to help them integrate it into their business. Companies outside the field are more or less aware of the possibilities of quantum tech for their sector. Startups would like to see an effort made to democratize the subject and thus facilitate their approach to potential customers and suppliers. Some are struggling with issues related to better understanding the potential market, knowing the players in the industry, and identifying their first customers. Now, to conclude, the Canadian National Quantum Strategy comes at a critical time where investments, both from the private sector and governments, are accelerating. Canada must be agile and make the right strategic decisions to remain relevant and at the forefront of quantum sciences and technologies. Continuing to fund existing programs is a great start, but more needs to be done. Some funds should be allocated towards provincial ecosystem efforts and for a common Canadian ecosystem. There are many key players and interesting quantum initiatives in Canada right now, but more cohesion amongst the provinces and various local ecosystems would help to boost the impact Canada can have on the international scene. As a country, we're often listed in the top 5, but it's a fragile position. And if we don't invest adequately into the sector, so making the right decisions today will ensure that Canada gets to reap the social and economic benefits deriving from the development of this promising sector for generations. As mentioned by Raymond Laflamme in a previous meeting last week, this is a marathon rather than a sprint, and sufficient long-term investments will be extremely important in this global quantum race. Sorry if I spoke very quickly. I had a lot to say. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gagnon-Gordillo. We'll now move to our first round of questions with MP Gray for 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. My first questions are for Dr. Brizard. You had mentioned in your testimony that all security of which Internet and others is based on with the algorithms currently in place will collapse due to quantum computing, and that it's very serious. And you referred to Harvest Now, and you were talking about storage and going back and what would become public. So can you maybe just describe what that means just quickly? Like, are you referring to deleted messages or deleted emails, deleted? So, what exactly does that mean, if you don't mind?
All right. No, sure. Thanks for the question. Harvest now and decrypt later means that there's no protection on the internet that prevents all the packets that go around everywhere in the world to be intercepted. I mean, they can continue on their way, so it's not noticeable. Cannot notice it, but you can just take them and store them. That's what a harvest now means. You can harvest at the moment all the information that goes on the internet, even though some of it is protected by cryptographic systems, by the current cryptographic infrastructure. So those that are currently protected, maybe, and I only say maybe, we don't know, nobody knows how to decrypt them today without knowing the key. But this information that is harvested includes all you need to decrypt it later when a quantum computer becomes available. So when a quantum computer full scale, which hopefully we don't have yet, but there's no guarantee. Maybe there is one running in a basement somewhere of some agency. So, but let's assume there is no full scale quantum computer today yet. Then there will be one. It's not an if, it's not, there's no doubt at the moment that quantum computers will finally become a reality, full scale. And at that time, all this information was harvested already can be taken back and decrypted retroactively. So that's what I meant by everything that's been on the internet will become an open book. There's no point trying to save the past. It's gone.
Great. Thank you so much. We've got limited time here, so I want to get through a few more questions. Sure. How soon do you think this could be looming, and where do you think the biggest threats would be potentially from?
Well, when is a very difficult question. There are so many technological challenges before this can be achieved, and I'm a theoretician, so I'm not the right person to ask. But some people who really are more knowledgeable than me, like Michele Mosca, who, by the way, should have been invited to this committee if he hasn't been, is about the most vocal person about this threat. Thinks that the probability is about 1 in 2 that within 10 years we will have this capability. So it's not a guarantee.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for that. Do you believe governments as well as institutions like banks, schools, hospitals, social media platforms and apps, businesses are all aware of this emerging security risk from quantum computing?
Probably not.
Okay. That's a fair answer. What should be done to increase awareness and set off the alarm bells to ensure that they're ahead of the curve in protecting Canadian security and privacy?
Education. There's no magic bullet. People are just not sufficiently aware of the threat, and when they are told, they could panic. But it's like global change. I know that time is limited, but trying to fix the issue will cost money, but nothing near how much it will cost if we don't do anything. Again, like global change. I'm talking about the weather, of course.
Thank you. What kind of a threat could this pose to national security?
Well, it depends what cryptographic systems they are actually using. If they are using, or if they are depending on the systems that were developed by, let's say, in the 80s perhaps, then they are very much a threat. But if they're using something else that they don't telling us about, perhaps national security people already have developed stuff that would not be vulnerable to quantum computing. There's no way I can tell.
Thank you. What policies could government be looking at now to develop in order to counter some of these looming potential security risks?
Well, I think that there should be how should I say, a culture of not encouraging like banks or enterprises or what have you, who do not migrate to quantum safe technologies. Just as it's like, if they don't want to make the effort, then they shouldn't be trusted, and people shouldn't do business with them. So if there is a consensus of withdrawing not only support in terms of federal support, but customers from, and that requires in the education of the customers. But if customers understand they should keep away from vendors who are not protecting them, then perhaps that would foster a faster reaction.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have. We'll now move to MP Gahir for 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for making time for this committee. My first question is for Mr. Brassard. I'm especially interested in the interjunction between finance and quantum computing. How are private businesses, especially those in the finance sector, preparing for the coming risks and opportunities posed by quantum cryptography?
Well, in the financial sector, if confidential data leaks, of course, it's a serious threat. I should have said that this, however it's not decrypt later, is not entirely so bad, because sometimes if you can decrypt in 10 years something that came out today, maybe it's not serious. So it's only a threat if the information is decrypted at the time when it is still relevant, which in the financial sector could mean only a fairly short period of time, if I understand your world. But still, as soon as a quantum computer is available, if financial transactions that should be kept secret become an open book to the competition, it could be serious, or to other countries, it could be a serious problem. Now, it also, quantum computing may offer good things for the financial sector. It is conceivable that quantum algorithms would be able to solve some problems in the financial sector more efficiently than classical computers. So we should not think of quantum computers as being evil. They are, in fact, mostly good, as long as they're used for good, like most other things. And now we're afraid of their use for bad purposes, but they have much more potential for good in the longer term.
Great, thank you. My next question is for Madam Iberciel. I apologize if I pronounced that last name incorrectly. What limitations are there do advanced material research face with classical computers, and what solutions can quantum computing provide in that area?
Pouvez-vous juste répéter la question?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yep, happily. What limitations does advanced material research face with classical computers, and what solutions can quantum computing provide?
Merci.
Thank you. In fact, quantum computing will allow us essentially, and I'm not as a specialist in the advanced materials, I have a keen that is, but it will allow us to accelerate the development of these materials. We can't lose sight of that. And it could mean that materials that would take 10 to 15 years to develop it, and I may be exaggerating a bit, but you can see where I'm heading. With quantum, it would speed up the process of discovery of materials in the same way that we will be in a position to identify the properties, whether they're physical or functional, that we are looking for with new materials. And with quantum, we'll be able to move on from that to accelerate the development of these materials. So I think that is a tremendous advantage. And I always come back to the idea of the teams that are, this is precious to us, at Prima Quebec, and the equipment that we use in universities and colleges in Canada. We have leading edge material equipment, but we need to have that as well as the personnel that can operate these leading edge pieces of equipment. And this is the same thing for classical materials that are developed with the current means that we have, but also for the whole quantum sector. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that definitely helps. Thank you. My final question is for Dr. Chong. I'm looking at the interjunction between sort of quantum computing and medical data. How is quantum computing going to improve the analysis of medical data, and what benefits could be like fully realized from that?
Okay. So the way I would make the metaphor effectively is just that the kinds of calculations that are posing these security risks that it still depends on specifically the problem, right? Can potentially be, again, as often as said in all the previous answers, vastly accelerated, right? In any experiment, in any new product development, in any new AI development as well, there's always a component of it that is dedicated to computation, and not just computation in a simple, you push a button and you create a system out of that. A lot of the experimentation, hyperparameter optimization, trying different settings of a model while you're training it, right? They all consume vast amounts of energy, vast amounts of time. And so there is some theoretical work that would suggest that if we can convert some of these training problems for neural networks into a quantum computable problem, right? The same benefits that you would have for decrypting an encrypted message, right, could actually be applied for the training of a neural network. What that would enable is that you would basically be able to run multiple computations simultaneously, and you would vastly accelerate your training time. The emphasis from our original opening statement really was that is just one component of the greater healthcare application, but it is a substantial part of it, right? So some of those resources, some of those calculations are only accessible to the largest, most best funded public institutions, and also the private companies as well. And so the ability to vastly accelerate by several orders of magnitude these kinds of computations are going to make what was previously hard maybe a little bit easier, what was previously impossible now possible. And not stepping outside of the field of radiology for a second, a lot of the things within like proteomics and genetics research that involves even larger degrees of analysis, drug discovery and drug development, which involves almost, like, for example, protein folding, things and applications like that are extremely expensive and very difficult to perform now, may become much faster, right? And this is going to enable a whole new generation of potential treatments and also potential AI systems.
Thank you very much. On passe maintenant.
We now give the floor to Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question will be for Dr. Brassard. Obviously, it's an honor to be able to welcome you here. You have a resume that is very impressive. And I'd like to hear you speak about the first applications of the quantum applications. What would they be, and what do you think that we'll be able to do to use it for in terms of energy transition? For example, with the electric vehicles, are there any possibilities on that front? Well, the first application, in my opinion, is quantum cryptography. That is the real application, and it is functional in order to protect information. So if we're talking about quantum calculations, the first application probably would be to simulate physical systems. That was the application that Richard Feynman imagined at the outset back in 1981 when he launched the concept of quantum computers. So we could work in real time if we had such a machine. And if we had that in real time, it would include simulating a protein, the way that a protein can replicate itself, and it could help to manufacture targeted medications. So that's one of the primary applications. In terms of electric vehicles, I'm sorry, but I don't have any particular application in mind in the quantum world. Thank you. Do you think that there might be some way of developing, and that is to say, if there was a strategy put forward by the government, what would your priorities be, and what are your criticisms currently faced with the needs that we see in industry and in the various sectors? I would say that the most important, how can I put this? You have to leave researchers to develop their own imaginations. That's what allows us to make real progress.
And knowledge. Donc,
so more we want to tell people do this, do that, the slower will move forward in the long term. It's really important to allow researchers in doing fundamental research to discover for themselves what is really interesting. And some projects will bite the dust, but others will make extraordinary discoveries, and that's the only way to make serious progress. Progress, if I can put it this way, a quantum jump rather than moving slowly with small steps in new technology. The government of Quebec announced a lot of innovations in Sherbrooke and in Bromont, and the government of Ontario did the same thing on their side, and the federal government made several announcements. So do you think that money is being sprinkled around too much, or should it be concentrated? We're talking about $360 million over the next few years. Do you think that this way of supporting the industry is adequate? Well, it depends what you want to do. If we want to develop a quantum computer or refine other aspects of the quantum computers that would allow us to connect the whole country potentially and eventually maybe the whole world using the internet model that we have, if we want to do that, that would require a lot of resources. And so it goes a bit against what you have said. We need to have a really targeted object or project for that. At the same time, we do have to sprinkle around more money because basic researchers like myself need resources. I have no ties with industry, and they need to be able to continue their research and do this kind of job. So both have to be done at once. Last week, Ms. Simon raised a flag to say that we had to get ready for a quantum revolution. And we have been told that quantum cryptography would be able to break much of the cryptography currently in use. So do you believe that our industry is really preparing adequately? And what are they facing with these new technologies coming down the line? Well, first of all, there was a little error and interpretation. Quantum cryptography is in no way used to break this kind of computing. it is secure against anything. But we can use traditional cryptography and quantum cryptography hand in hand towards the same goal, which is to protect confidentiality and privacy. What is a danger for traditional cryptography and not for quantum cryptography? We hope that it's not already the case, but unless there are some machines that already are working. But we know in the 1980s, we were imagining how we could use it to break the pseudo security of the internet today. Well, you're a little getting out of my comfort zone here, but what do you think would happen with such a computer? Well, I answered as I answered another question. We can't know. It's a guessing game. But we can fear that chances are it will be available. It will be made. Well, I like your use of the word fear. Thank you, Mr. Brassard. I now give the floor to Mr. Maas for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. And I'll start with Mr. Brassard and then move to other witnesses to get their input as well. I am curious about cybersecurity, and currently we now see some companies and even some public institutions paying out ransomware, or so ransoms for material that's, and we actually have lack of law related to that. You don't have to disclose your hacking and so forth, and payments and so forth. Just want to get your, just a general sense of that field and how that might change for that. I know it's a little more theoretical, but perhaps I can get that. And then other witnesses, please to jump in soon after Mr. Brassard. I am curious about this. Cybersecurity has been something I've been pushing in fraud and a number of different things. So please, Mr. Brassard, can you start the conversation on that?
All right. So since I am there's echo somewhere. So since I'm a theoretician, I'm of course very comfortable with your question. The short answer is that what I talked about at length, this harvest now and decrypt later strategy, is not a threat against a ransomware, because to do ransomware, you need to do it today. And it's not because you will be able to decrypt in 10 years messages sent today that you can go back and ransom people who have moved on to something else already. So to ransom, you really need to be able today on the spot to decrypt and then get information that allows you to blackmail or what have you. And this would require quantum computer being available already now. So if there is not one, then this is not a danger at the moment. But when it will become available, it will be a danger.
Let's have a comment on cybersecurity in that.
If I may, I can jump in. I'll say maybe in addition to what Professor Brassard said, that a lot of information that is current will not be vulnerable to ransomware, but it could be that there's historic data or something in somebody's past that needs to be kept safe, and perhaps it'll impact their current role or their current credibility, and that would be something that would be vulnerable to for ransom. And more generally, I just wanted to point out that with the race to protect all of our current information and our past information, that's something that it's not really a race between countries, because either we're all winners and we protect everything, or we're all losers. It's kind of like vaccinations. You can't just rely on just protecting or creating quantum safe data security for Canada, because Canadian banks, for example, have transactions outside of Canada, for example. So any security system is only as strong as its weakest link. So I think that's an important piece to keep in mind.
Important piece. Is there any international efforts working together on that? We're just touching the surface here right now, and we have been asking some of our guests about international cooperative efforts. I'm just curious, is there anything going on in that field? I can just see the vulnerability here if is what you're saying is true, which I do believe.
Is that question for me?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I should have been more specific.
As far as I know, there isn't a coordinated large-scale international effort. I think there is collaboration at the research level for sure, but not at any kind of a national strategy or industrial level.
I've asked
I
this.
agree.
Okay, thank you. I asked real quickly, maybe if everyone wants again, and this is, I don't know who's taking advantage of SHRED tax credits. If there is anybody there, can you give us, we had a good response from the last panel on that. If you are, can we get an opinion as to whether they're working or not in terms of application? These are research tax credits. Is anybody taking advantage of those? No, I don't get. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. If I can move to Ms. Hall, then. One of the things that we've also been identifying is bringing young people up and retaining them. And I think Mr. Gagnon-Gordillo mentioned this as well, too. What can we do to continue to have people come through our systems and stay and also not be plucked from Canada as we grow quantum computing in its workplace here in Canada?
Yeah, so I've had I have a suggestion that I really think we should. This suggestion was actually made by somebody last week, but I do think we need to develop a pan-Canada training program that involves a collaboration among the institutions and collaboration with industry. I think CDL was mentioned as a possible center for directing such a thing, but I think that this could really help to bring more people here. In terms of keeping them here, I've had several international students that have been successful in staying. There's been a lot of talk about difficulty in that. I'm not sure. I mean, my experience thus far is that as long as somebody can get a job, they seem to be able to stay. But I think that recruiting and retaining people is one of our key challenges. And I think the universities are largely competing in this space now, and we need to work together. And I really feel like if we had a training program that was beyond exchanges, but beyond student exchanges, beyond internships, and actually courses that people can give from different institutions that could rotate, for example, and an actual accreditation that would attract people from outside, I think that would be an excellent addition.
Merci beaucoup, Professor.
Thank you very much. I give now the floor to Mr. Généreux for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank all of the witnesses. Ms. Sohini, could you send us your TikTok address? Because apparently you're not the only person in the world to have the videos on that. Ms. Simon shook us with what she said, but she particularly proposed a possibility that Canada, because it exists in other committees, have a committee of independent experts that could conduct or advise the government on the various possibilities or at least the potential development for Canada so that they could invest in more justified ways, if I can put it that way. What do you think of that idea? And what would be the composition of such a panel if it were to be set up? I could answer. Or I was asking Ms. Sohini. I'm sorry, I used your first name. I don't want to massacre your last name.
I think that's a really important piece of developing our national strategy, and I think it was a strong message that came out also in the consultations that happened already to try to create a plan for the future. So yes, I am a strong supporter of the advisory board idea, and I feel like the composition has to include expertise not just on the technology aspect of it or the quantum information processing or the scientific aspect of it, but also we need experts from, for example, cybersecurity, from industries that will be impacted, such as healthcare and of course finance and also of course energy. And beyond that, make sure that the composition is not business as usual. Unfortunately, as I've already mentioned, we often find that we don't get a diverse enough group around the table. So I feel like the scientific advisory board should be something that takes that into account.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Yeah, okay, thank you. you very much. Mr. Gagnon-Cardillo, you said earlier that you were in the Sherbrooke region. There was an important quantum cluster in Quebec, and you said that you wanted to buy. I'm not sure what you were referring to. You have to invent the quantum computer. It still remains to be invented, but you said you wanted to buy one. So please clear that up for me too, and perhaps Mr. Brassard afterwards. Yes, well, I could perhaps leave someone who has a more academic background and bagage to answer that, but people talk about selling them, and we also talk about simulations, but at the same time, it's not time now to buy one, but it's buying access to a prototype of a quantum computer. We're talking about 127 qubits here. It's a System 1 from IBM, so if we have a dedicated access, perhaps, that can show Canada, or allow Canada to have a dedicated access to it, so that we would be able to test algorithms on this computer, and afterwards, at the same time, because there's IBM Q that already exists at Sherbrooke University. That's not a dedicated access. It's a shared one, and it will continue to be so. So when new models come out, we'll still have access through IBM. But these are prototypes. So we talk about quantum computers, but they're prototypes. And I'll leave Dr. Brassard the floor. That's quite right what you said, and in fact there are prototypes that exist that we can buy or rent time on, have dedicated time, and these prototypes function with a relatively low number of qubits, some 127 as he said. But if we really want to apply the algorithms to a large scale, we need many more qubits than that. So in terms of quantum computers, there aren't any available at the moment, but there are prototypes that are allowing us to, if I can put it this way, toy with it, so we can see on a small scale how it might work. That's available. So not only with IBM that we can rent this, but there's Alien Technologies in Montreal that makes these. We can even put in an order, and in a year or two it would be delivered. So we can, in fact, buy a quantum computer that's built in Montreal and Quebec. I'm sorry, my time is up. Not already. No, it's not up. Dr. Brassard. I don't know, Mr. Généreux, go ahead. Do you share Ms. Simon's concern about the urgency that we're facing in Canada? Well, I think it's quite clear by what I've said up until now. Yes, it's a disaster in the waiting. If it happens, it will be at the apocalypse. Thank you very much. I'll now give the floor to Ms. Lapointe for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
For Dr. Gose, I'll have you know that I did watch your TED Talk, and I know that I will never flip a coin to settle a matter with a quantum computer, ever. So I want to thank you for all the work that you do in supporting women in science. And from your experience, I'd like to hear more about your work in implementing equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. So why is this lens important? And does it incorporate the principles of GBA plus analysis in the work that you do?
Well, the reason it's important, I'll start with that. There's many reasons, whether you want to talk about social justice or economic progress. The point is, if we wanted to really have an edge in quantum or even other areas of STEM, AI, or many other areas where there's an underrepresentation of women, we are just not using the full talent that is out there. So what we know already from studies is there's no actual fundamental reason why women cannot contribute to these areas. In fact, they have been, but they just haven't had this equal opportunities and resources. So from that perspective, it's just not very efficient or optimal to be only tapping into part of the whole workforce. So we're losing out on ideas, we're losing out on economic progress, and of course, this is a matter of social justice as well. So those are reasons why this is an important issue. Going forward with GBA Plus, I know, for example, NSERC in all of its funding applications now insists on that. There's also some additional measures in place for training of highly qualified personnel, as they're called, which are basically students and postdocs, where any kind of funding has to include some level of effort towards being more inclusive. However, these, I believe, are still at a level which are token. We need to be much more proactive about this, because the fact is that the needle has not moved in over a decade. So what we are trying to advocate is for a much more structured and scientific approach, which is about applying a full framework, set the goals, incentivize this kind of work, provide value for it, celebrate it, and attach dollars to it. In the end, this is just like every other goal. It needs resources and dollars.
I agree. So in your expert opinion, what steps need to be taken to ensure the national quantum strategy is inclusive? And what would be the potential consequences to the quantum technology sector in Canada if EDI is not applied?
Well, I think to answer the second part of your question first, when we don't include EDI, the effects have already been clear. If you, for example, look at AI, where there's all these unintentional consequences, where we have built-in bias into all of these training systems. So that's a clear example. And here's another test everybody can do. Just if you go online and type in famous physicists on Google and just see what you get, you'll see that Google has learned all of our history of biases about who can be a scientist. So even at that fundamental level, there's a huge negative impact. So that answers, what could happen in the quantum sector as well. Similarly, if you look at the executive boards of most of the startup companies today in quantum, already you're seeing a very skewed representation. And this is going to impact what are these technologies going to be used for, who will get access, who will be making decisions about what these technologies will be used for. In healthcare, for example, are we going to be focused on women's health or not? Are we going to, tailor these technologies towards all of the population? These are all questions that arise. And I know I have limited time, so I'm happy to discuss this more or submit something written, but I'll stop there for now.
Say that changing the structures of the workplace, along with recruitment and retention of talent to quantum sector and STEM in general, is needed, instead of just trying to change people as part of the solution?
I think there needs to be a whole spectrum of actions taken, starting with recruitment and retention for sure, but there's also going to, as you said, building a classroom, a workplace environment that is inclusive. There's lots of research about how this can be done. So we need to bring in experts to the table who have already provided recommendations for how to, for example, build an inclusive classroom. In my own team, for example, I find that I often have students and researchers who want to work with me because they value this. So there's a clear benefit to creating an environment where people feel heard and seen. So I think you're right that there are many different approaches, and we need both policy level kinds of actions as well as changes in individual teams, in cultures, in classrooms, and in research environments.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Prof.
Thank you very much, Professor. We'll now go to Mr. Lemire for 2.5 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. Ms. Iperciel, I would like to know more about Prima's vision. It represents an industry that deserves to be better known for advanced materials. So there seems to be a greater and greater contribution of these industries. We're talking about $14 million, which is it's a big sum of money. So can the government do more to attract more investment with Prima, and how could they do so? Thank you, Mr. Lemire. And indeed, you well read our documents. Just to give you an idea, it's 450 businesses small and medium-sized businesses that are associated in the advanced materials sector. So we can't forget that this is a transversal industry. We find it in different sectors: environment, transport, energy, chemistry. It's very broad. And how could the government of Canada, even at the provincial level, we could increase investments from the private sector? I'd say, that, first of all, that with the formula that Prima uses, which is to promote innovation projects that are collaboratives, we have to understand that within a project there will always be funding from the province of Quebec, funding that may come from NSERC, and the businesses have to also invest in the project. So already with this collaborative formula for innovation in research and development, that it allows us to, and you're probably aware of this, this tends to decrease over time. So I think in order to better recognize the strategic role that advanced materials play would certainly help. Often what we see is that people look at the final product, clean tech, for example. So several clean technologies wouldn't exist without the existence of advanced materials. So sensors, membranes, and filters, for example. So I think that recognition, in my opinion, is very important. And I was saying earlier in my speech that these materials have an important role to play in the hardware sectors as well. And for quantum materials have very unusual qualities. So superconductors, for example, would mean that we'd have no thermal energy loss. And that's very important, I believe. So yes, I believe that materials should be showcased more by governments, these advanced materials, whether they're provincial or federal, but also with different policies, whether it's the strategies, the Canadian strategy, the national quantum strategy, that is, whether it's the hydrogen strategy or all of the approaches for carbon neutrality, they have a role to play. Thank you very much, Ms. Ziperciel. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Mass for 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, maybe I can go to get Mr. Chong involved in the conversation here with regards to quantum computing and artificial intelligence. Can you give some practical examples of what people should expect in terms of progress on this? I mean, I think that's part of the problem here. Like when I talk about telecom industry, I talk often about the key of getting the spectrum auction under a proper policy, which then people just their eyes glaze over and they go to sleep and don't understand, and that's the end of the conversation. Can you give us a little bit more of a taste in terms of what this means for people's practical lives and perhaps in professions?
Yeah, sure. Again, like we've constantly talked about that idea of acceleration, right? I think that technical term of NP hard has been brought up a few times as well, right? And the reason why we have such a difficult time communicating this computational part from a everyday perspective is that you really need to be almost on the front lines of development and training to understand how much time and energy it actually entails, right? We can make the metaphor, for example, recently with COVID vaccination, right? About when you read those stories of Pfizer or AstraZeneca or any of the drugs that have been developed over there as well too, some of those mRNA platforms were able to generate candidate molecules on the order of about 48 to 72 hours, right? So, but yet, if you looked at our recent experience with the vaccine rollout as well, that was on the order of months to years. A lot of that was spent in the validation phase of things. Okay. Now, for any of you that are not familiar with molecular or drug development, right, the idea that you could have a candidate molecule ready for potential trials, right, within 48 hours is extremely unusual, right? If you look at the history of vaccines previously before, right, we were always on the order of years, if not, like if you think about historically, for example, with polio, right, how long that vaccine development had taken as well too. And so that's sort of that transformation, right? And I think that many of us, from the medical establishment perspective as well too, right? Like some of that developments that were done there, right, are extremely cutting edge in some sense. So if I take that metaphor there of being able to develop a candidate molecule in about 48 hours, right, ready for vaccination, and you start applying it to nearly everything else as well, right? So if we wanted to do a chemical molecular testing right now, what we would ordinarily do in vivo, in vitro, what those word terms means just that in an experimental basis, right, is that it takes years, a lot of that to develop a new chemotherapy, a drug or a molecule, an antimicrobial molecule as well too. A lot of that takes a lot of coordination, effort, energy, investment by private, investment by public sector as well. Now, if you can transform that and take out this very difficult component and vastly accelerate it, the applications are going to change by quite a bit. If I talk to maybe voice recognition right now, right? I can say that trigger keyword to your smartphone and start speaking to your computer there. I remember when I was in high school as a kid trying to get voice recognition to work on my computer, you would sit there, talk to your computer for 3 hours. The accuracy would be abysmal, right? And so the idea right now that you can call out to your phone and it just automatically works all of a sudden, it was a gradual transition, but now you can actually see that application kind of take place. And so a lot of this discussion here in the committee room right now is focused on security implications, on the negative possible effects as well too, but that acceleration will work in kind of both ways potentially as well. And so some of those things that are taking so much time and effort to be able to do are going to be vastly accelerated. And if they do so, right, there are going to be positive effects, there are going to be negative effects. And we hope to kind of control the negatives and to be able to empower the positives and make sure that they're equally representative of all the possible benefits, and to have Canada be part of that discussion, right? So some of those changes that you've seen in compute before over the last kind of 10, 15 years as well too, will hopefully on the positive end of things represent themselves as well too. So you're going to get these massive innovations that we can hopefully harness and help many people with.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I know that this is not the right way in your committee, but I feel I need to say something, which is that I need to, like, there's this myth, you see, this myth that quantum computers are so vastly more powerful than classical computers that they can solve everything exponentially faster. This is not true. Quantum computers will solve some problems exponentially faster than classical computers. For instance, if you want to factor numbers and break cryptography. But other problems, in particular NP-hard problems, there's strong evidence that quantum computers cannot offer a significant advantage to solve NP-complete problems or NP-hard problems. No more than quadratic improvement, which is not to be sneezed at, but is very, very far from being exponential. So yes, some NP-hard problems could be solved faster with quantum computers, but not as spectacularly as other problems like those that are allowed to break factoring, that break cryptography, I mean. So it's not a uniform speed up for all problems when you have a quantum computer. Some problems, yes, some others, no.
Thank you, Mr. Brassard. I'll just to time, so we appreciate your comments. I'll now move to Mr. Cram for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be mindful with my time if I don't have that much leeway, apparently. But Dr. Brassard, some of your statements have really caught my attention. You've said that if we don't take the appropriate steps, all of the cryptographic infrastructure will collapse, and this is a disaster waiting to happen, and even the apocalypse, if I heard you correctly. So
I said that, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand. Let's say we took absolutely zero precautions over the next decade or two. What does that apocalypse look like?
Well, it means that if nothing changes, then not only is the past an open book when a quantum computer becomes available, and as I said, there's nothing you can do to prevent that. It's gone. The past is gone. Forget about it. But if you take no action now, then in 10 years, whatever would have been sent so-called confidentially in the next 10 years will also become an open book. And that's what I mean by you cannot save the past, but you can try to save the future. Now, is it an apocalypse? It depends. Some things that are sent under the cover of confidentiality, if they are revealed in 10 years, nobody cares. If your credit card number becomes open in 10 years, but you don't use it anymore, who cares? However, your medical history, you might care to keep secret for the rest of your life. So if you send anything that has to do with your medical history and you care to have it secret for the rest of your life, forget it. And of course, even more importantly, if national security data or whatever is sent without more protection, then yes, maybe it could be an apocalypse, depending on who are the bad guys who will use it whenever it becomes an open book.
Okay, so then let's maybe pick up on that. If you were the special advisor to the Minister of National Defense, and your objective was to just make sure that the Army and the Navy and the Air Force could communicate securely, what recommendations would you make?
Well, there are two answers. One is to use quantum cryptography, again, which is provably unconditionally secure, but requires infrastructure that may not be available for these applications. The other is to use different purely classical systems that are currently being developed. Some of them are in fact fully developed, but are still under scrutiny to assess their security. And there is a very significant effort at NIST in the United States to try to sort of standardize so-called post-quantum cryptography, where a large number of proposals were sent to NIST from all around the world. And then there were several rounds and it's an open thing. It was totally open to the whole community, so that people submitted their proposal to NIST, and all these proposals were open, and other people, much of the same people, were taking a shot at other people's proposals. So many were shut down, and there are some that are still surviving. And NIST is expected at some point to make a recommendation, not of one winner as they did for AES, but as here are a few that we think look pretty good. But again, knowing that there is absolutely no hope to ever prove security for these purely classical systems. So when NIST makes its recommendation of what to use, then the question becomes, do we want to just follow the recommendation given by a foreign government, even though friendly, or do we want to have more local, Canadian expertise? And I think we should. So we should not take NIST recommendation at face value and use that immediately. It would also be assessed on the Canadian scale. But if it's urgent, still it's not because NIST has not yet given its recommendations that security is not needed today. So I guess the best thing to do is what Professor Simon said: use several of them. We don't know which are secure. Maybe none of them are secure. But if you use many of them for really high security applications, you use many of them to establish secret keys, and then you combine these keys in a secure way, which we know how to do, then the resulting key will be as secure as the strongest of these systems. So here's an unusual case where the security of the whole is as secure as the strongest, not the weakest link, which is very comforting. Now, you cannot do that on the internet for the average person, because it would take way too much time for a normal transaction. But for a national security application, that might be the way to go at the moment, until we have a better idea on which of these are more secure really and should be used. But at the moment, that's the best we can do. And combine with quantum cryptography if you can afford, if you have the infrastructure to do that.
Thank you very much, MP Cram. Mr. Brassard, will move to Mr. Dong for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, I want to say thank you to all the witnesses. You know, the more we learn about quantum computing in the past meetings, I see a significant improvement in quality of questions and quality of testimony. So we're learning even more today. Before I forget, I wholeheartedly agree with Dr. Hall's point on a national training program or shared national training program. So to that point, to Dr. Goose, I think you said that you are currently teaching undergrads about quantum computing. Can you later submit to the committee on some of the details of your program and the curriculums and enrollment, what kind of interest that you're seeing in your institution? That'd be very, very helpful. And you also talked briefly about there has been a lot of attention, a lot of discussion on AI ethics, but not enough on quantum ethics. Can you expand on that a little bit, the similarity and the uniqueness on quantum ethics?
Yes, sure. Firstly, yes, I'm happy to share my my course details. And secondly, a lot of the questions for AI ethics and technology ethics in the use of technology in general would, of course, also apply to quantum. So I think that's important to keep in mind. But additionally, I think quantum at this stage offers new kinds of potential applications that we haven't even perhaps even dreamed of. So we really need to have some kind of a structure to be able to, not get sort of taken aback by what will come in the future, and have a system in place to understand what we need to build into structures of how the technology is rolled out. And there's a second piece, which is on the security side. In fact, as Professor Brassard mentioned, quantum key distribution offers provably unhackable security. So let's say that at some point that happens and everybody has completely 100% secure encryption. That means bad actors have that too. So I feel like there's a lot of questions around regulation and policies of how this kind of technology is used, and what is acceptable, what is not. So those are questions we need to really be careful about.
I saw Dr. Brassard shook your head. Do you want to share with us your comments? Okay.
Yes. This is another myth that I want to debunk about security versus confidentiality, where security means like law enforcement. This is a false debate. It's security against security, by which I mean that citizens have a right to privacy which outweighs almost everything else. I said almost, and it's not true that that police or law enforcement use so much decryption to catch criminals. They use much more what we call metadata, which is who talks to whom, much more than what they say, and this is not protected by a regular encryption. So that this intelligence is still available even when the communication is encrypted, even if it cannot be decrypted by law enforcement. So I am a very, very, very strong advocate of privacy as a fundamental right for citizens. And it could in some cases lead to a bad person not being caught, yes, but it's a price to pay for something that is so much more important, which is privacy.
And I think that these are all very good advice for legislators. So if any panelists have more to add on quantum ethics, advice that's beneficial to legislators, please send it to us afterwards. And Dr. Brassard, since I have you at the mic, I have a very specific question. What's your opinion on what quantum computing will do to cryptocurrency field? Because we've seen quite a bit of hype in that field.
I think that the two worst abomination of computer science this century have been Facebook and Bitcoin. And that's just my personal opinion. And when I say Bitcoin, I mean not because I have anything against anonymous cash, which I think can be used also for bad things, but also for good things. That's not a debate. The debate is how much Bitcoin has wasted resources, like farms that the amount.
I think they will still the Bitcoins or cryptocurrency will still exist after the.
All right. Now, to answer your question. Cryptocurrencies, some of them, like Bitcoin, as it currently stands, will completely bite the dust as soon as a quantum computer is available, for two reasons. One is that it uses fundamentally digital signatures, and which as such is not necessarily broken by quantum computing if it's implemented properly, but it uses specifically the RSA type digital signature, if I'm not mistaken, and that is broken with a quantum computer. So the entire so-called blockchain will be broken as soon as the quantum computer is available, when the root is protected by RSA signatures. That's one thing. The other thing is that cryptocurrencies are based on the notion of proof of work, and they claim that in order to mine coins, you need to work so much time that they claim that there is a fundamental obligation to work for so much time or so much work in order to mine a new coin. This is not true, because quantum computing would allow us to mine coins much more efficiently only quadratically more efficiently. It's back to the P versus the NP hard question, but still, quantum computers would break the basic assumption of the proof of work that is behind most cryptocurrencies. So it doesn't mean that cryptocurrencies are dead. It means that the way that they are currently implemented will completely bite the dust when a quantum computer becomes available.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deltel, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our committee, and we thank you profusely for your contributions. And this is an outstanding group of witnesses, and you've been very useful in our research. Mr. Brassard, I'd like to speak to you a little bit about the Montreal company that you referred to earlier that could build quantum computers even. So could you talk to us a bit more about that without revealing any secrets? Well, first of all, I have no secrets to reveal because I have no insider knowledge on the subject. It's called Anyon, Anyon. It's Anyon Technologies or Anyon something. And their logo is We Build Quantum Computers. So I've had several opportunities to listen to conferences offered by the people running this company, but I don't know them personally. So all I can tell you on the subject is that they seem to be very serious. I haven't tried their products, and so I can't testify as to whether it's good, but they seem quite serious in terms of wanting to build quantum computers. It's on a small scale right now, but it's sufficient to do interesting research. If I understood you correctly earlier, you said that you yourself had rented prototypes to do experiments, or prototypes could be rented? No, I never rented anything from these people. I never personally experimented with a quantum computer that's real. I know I could if I wanted to, but I haven't done so. You can rent machine time on the IBM quantum computer, and several American companies allow you to rent time on their machines, but to do research, it's the same thing. So this is all for relatively small operations. I don't know if Anyon's first computer is available. I know they say within a year or two they'll have something available that will be for sale. So you can already place an order for it. But honestly, I don't know more about their business to speak more. Well, I'd like to come back to the issues of security and privacy that you mentioned. That there's a difference between security and confidentiality. My question is, because what you described is that in 10 years we might be able to discover things that we put on the internet or in our emails that are currently protected, but that in 10 years' time, computers, quantum computers, would have access to that. Is retroactively, yes. So is there no way, if they're so powerful, could the protective aspects not be as protective? Absolutely not. What we have to understand is that it's too late. The information I'm talking about has already been stored by future mischief makers or people who want to cause harm, or it could even be law enforcement. The information I'm talking about, which is information that has already been on the net, has already been stored away. Nothing can prevent anyone who has a quantum computer and who has stored this information from taking it out from the mothballs, if you will, and decrypt it retroactively. We can't save anything that's already been intercepted. We can only focus on the future. And it's not an issue of technology that we could invent later on to protect the information. The information wasn't protected when it was already out on the net. And as soon as it's being recorded, there's nothing to be done. I'd like to speak now about Ms. Hyperciel. Earlier you were mentioning that you had 8 projects that are currently underway. So without revealing any secrets, Could you give us an idea of what's happening, what the public and private investments are for projects that are currently underway in Quebec? Yes, I have an example. It's SB Quantum, which is in magnetometers, and Solmax, which is a business in the environmental sector. So the goals of the project were to ensure that magnetomet technologies would allow us to increase the reliability of detection of structures that are buried and that might contain contaminants. So I think that's a wonderful project. It's not confidential. 1.5 million has been put into this project, and in this case, the government of Quebec invested $747,000, and the other participants put in as much. So this is a wonderful project that was launched and by the Quebec government. And what's interesting is that there are different aspects of it. You can support the startup, you can support the small and medium-sized business, you can support one that supports two businesses, such as the one I mentioned, and we can support projects that will deal with several businesses within the research environment. So those kinds of examples, I'm trying to see a bit quickly what I might give you as other examples. I have a list of all kinds of draft projects, and it's quite significant. But at the same time, I could tell you that there's a development of synthetic diamond projects for quantum projects, and it has at an ambient temperature, because you can understand that diamonds could be a quantum material. And if you're interested, I'd advise you to go to Quebec Quantique's website. Olivier knows it very well, for all of the projects that have been funded between two businesses, or once again between the research and the businesses. We've made files that popularize the goals and objectives, what the problems that we're seeking to be solved were, and the monies invested. So for some of the projects, I'd say that beyond the Quebec government investing, there are also sometimes matching funds that will come from funding organizations like NSERC. Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Phil Moore.
This is today. You're painting an increasingly legible picture of a very complex landscape, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you. We have heard a lot about security in rather dire tones, but times. I'd like to kind of change that a little bit. I want to come to you, Dr. Hall. Now, it's nice to see you. I don't know if I am your MP, but I am Dalhousie University's MP, so it's very nice to see you with us today. And I went on to your research website before the meeting today, and I was moved by the young people that you are working with and how many there are, and the smiles and the interest that is clear in the photographs that you've posted there. Their imagination has been captured by something. They're thinking of the future. They're working towards something. And it kind of made me think of, the 1964 New York World's Fair, where GE had the world of tomorrow, the vision of tomorrow, and how electricity and gasoline cars were going to change the world. I wonder if we could turn to sort of a more optimistic outlook. And as you said, Dr. Hall, maybe it's not necessary that Canadians understand the technology, but they should understand why it's important. Can we talk with the panelists a little bit about, find your inner futurist, and where is all this going, and how is quantum computing or hybrid solvers going to make our lives better?
Yeah, I do want to say that, in the area of recruiting students and exciting students about this field, it's just not that difficult. I must say that we have some advantage over some other fields in the fact that quantum mechanics is so intrinsically interesting that I find that the spectrum of students that are interested in this area vary from those that want to change the world, which this can do, to those that just find quantum mechanics interesting. So because you have that full spectrum of applied to extremely basic, I find that this is an area in which it's not that hard to excite students. I think that that it's extremely important that we do excite students to go into this area, and important that we collaborate together as institutions to make sure that these people stay, as has been discussed many times. I think that it's particularly important to reach people outside of the students that are already interested. And I made the point during my speech that I think some of the shorter term applications like sensing are a lot easier to explain than NP hard problems. I think I have watched all of these meetings, and it has taken a lot of meetings to convey that quantum cryptography has got to be the future, and the future of security. But I do think that there tends to be a longer term perspective taken whenever somebody's trying to sell quantum computing. But if you can very easily sell quantum sensing, I think this is an area that people should focus on in terms of trying to excite people about this area.
So if you were going into a grade 8 science classroom, maybe you'd visit such classrooms, and you were trying to recruit people to think about a career to follow in your footsteps, what would you say to excite them about the future? How would you sell quantum mechanics or rather quantum computing to them?
I would sell that it's a privilege to have a job where you can think about things like deep mathematics and still do something that's useful for a possible application. And I think that this can appeal to people that vary from the small academic people that just want to play with stuff to people that actually want to change the world. And a lot of today's youth want to change the world. So I think it's critical to explain how quantum can change the world as part of the pitch, because, a lot of people are interested in energy for very good reasons, but quantum can change the world just as much as developing a solar cell material can change the world, because you can use a quantum computer to design a solar cell material, and you can use quantum spectroscopy to study energy materials. So I think it's really important to appeal to all of the different aspects that motivate people to go into a field. And I think changing the world and doing cool science covers it.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hall. Any time left? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Merci. Je passerai maintenant.
Thank you. Mr. Lemire, you now have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask a question of Mr. Gagnon-Gordillo from Quebec Quantique. First of all, thank you for being here. You know that Luc Sirois, the chief innovator of the province of Quebec, said last November that our businesses were having trouble doing research and development. And we've heard from Alain Lamarre about the capacity of producing COVID vaccines. And on this study, we heard from another person as well. So could the government play a bigger role in Quebec? What do they need to do in terms of investing more in research and development? Well, that's quite a broad question. I'll try and answer. What I'd say is that in terms of investing, the PDC fund has it's a Crown corporation, $200 million to invest in deep tech. So clearly for quantum technologies, it could take up a big chunk of that. Now, it's pretty well known what's been happening in Canada for the past few years, that there are not a lot of funds for projects that aren't ready to launch yet. But as soon as you try to move from startup to scale up, that's where the money's lacking. And in the end, generally speaking, I think from the United States and other countries, that's where these people are lost, because there's more people willing to take the risks. So, and when we talk about much more significant series of risk capital to invest, I think governments could play a bigger role there. The other thing in that area is that in terms of quantum technologies, it takes a long time. So sometimes big risk investors would look to maybe a 7 to 10 year period, Facebook, Airbnb, companies like that. But in terms of quantum technologies, it's really more over a 15-year period that we're looking at. So the development time for a business, it takes a much longer, and the investor has to be much more patient. That plays a role too. So if we had more support from the federal government, I think that could play a very significant role. I will ask another question if I have time. Well, that's pretty much all the time you had. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, he likes to try it.
Monsieur Mas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quickly to Mr. Brassard, if there's a couple of countries out there that we should be aligning or working with, are there out there, or should we? I'm just interested in who should we be focusing with? Is there the United States? Is it Australia? Is it Europe? I mean, what do we do as a country in terms of prioritization of who to work with?
Well, that's a difficult question,
Yep.
but the United States is our ally, of course, and they do good things, good research, good development, and I don't think that we can pretend they're not there. So yes, we should collaborate with them. Not that we had a choice. I think that Europe is also as a whole. They have a concerted effort in Europe to develop both quantum cryptography and a quantum internet. It's very concerted effort. It's going really well over there, and we would only benefit from collaborating with them. Japan is also doing really good work. So it's just pick your choice. There's no single answer.
Real quickly over to Ms. Hall. You mentioned about almost like a pan-Canadian degree on quantum computing. Is that what you're working at? Like, is that so? If we were able to concisely get some cooperation amongst Canadian universities, do you think it would be enough palatable in terms of instead of doing each university fighting for its slice or specialty? Is that what you're proposing? Is that more of a comprehensive thing that would bring everybody together to have a more robust, centralized or specific scoped approach?
Yeah, I absolutely think everybody should come together and coordinate. And I think that would benefit everybody because we would stop competing for graduate students and start collaborating to include them. It would also serve to help in terms of inclusive in diversity and inclusion, because you could then reach people that are all across the country in terms of students being able to access this training program. Having it be accredited, I think, is important in order to bring people in from outside. That is something that easily hooks students if they know that they're going to get something at the end. And I really think that there is probably barriers to this because I don't know how easy it will be to have courses offered at UBC and courses offered at Dalhousie that can be taken by other people. But in this electronic age in which we're all very used to taking courses online, it should be possible.
I did that with the disability community and instead of fighting it. It's just really interesting concept, actually. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Gray.
It's really cool.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions here. Dr. Chong, I wanted to ask if you're aware if hospitals and medical organizations are updating their privacy policies to prepare for quantum computing, and if you're aware of that, or if not, if you have any recommendations.
Right, that's actually just a very interesting question as well. To my knowledge, I have not heard of those kind of updates to that. I think that this whole notion of a Q day that will occur at one point where all of our public key encryption systems will be disabled or compromised in some manner, right? Like I think everyone's thinking about that, but that timeline we haven't seen or even seen a potential exploit yet. So this is actually very, very far-reaching and cutting edge, but I don't see that there is a policy there. With respect to I think that the evolution from healthcare information IT would parallel quite closely with financial systems, right? So when you see the beginnings, just in the same way that public key encryption was and SSL was incorporated for online banking. I remember a time when you did not do online banking, you didn't have a smartphone, you would call it onto a fax number as well too. But then we actually transitioned to a point where that was safe to perform on a computer. I can easily imagine that those same regulations that move for finance will also very easily apply to healthcare as well. And so if there is a build out of a quantum encrypted network or any sort of similar standards or adoptions of certain algorithms that are quantum resistant, right, I think that those will move all in the same way. So I'd like to see actually from a government or regulator perspective, right, that once we have some indication that potential exploits are going to occur, that certain high risk or critical industries and fields, right, will be first of all categorized as high risk, and then the regulations are just synchronized between them. And I think that other communication industries, the IT industry is really going to benefit from that as well. And we can actually all learn from the various industries together.
Thank you very much. My next question
please,
is
sorry to interrupt, but please just allow me to answer your question.
Okay, really,
also.
really quick answer, because I've got a couple other questions.
I'm sorry, just tell you that Toshiba has been very seriously working on protecting medical data with quantum cryptography. I stop here.
Great, thank you for that. Mr. Gagnon-Gordillo, I wanted to ask you that you had mentioned during your intervention how Canada is having a hard time retaining students. And Leger had just released a study where immigrants were asked why they would not recommend Canada to future immigrants. And one of the primary key reasons was due to the cost of living here. And so I just wanted to ask you if what your thoughts were when you said Canada's having a hard time retaining students. Is the cost of living, housing, finding housing, cost of housing, is that playing into some of this?
I think we need to separate in terms of which students, because if this study that you're talking about is all students, then depending on the program that they study in, obviously it's not the same salaries. If we're talking about really in this sector, normally it would be some great salaries where the cost of living would not be an issue. So in terms of retaining the talent that study here in quantum sciences and quantum technologies, normally it would lead to careers that lead to great salaries, and the cost of living, in my opinion, in Canada would not be an issue.
Great, thank you for that. Now, I have a question here which anyone can respond to, so if you're interested and you have a thought on this, maybe just physically raise your hand and then I can call on you. So we know that the government right now is working on a quantum strategy, and are there any lessons or policies from other countries that they're using around quantum computing where it's something that Canada should pay attention to and replicate here in Canada? So does anyone have any thoughts on that? Maybe just raise your hand. Something that we would want to see in our strategy here. Ms. Hall?
I can say something, yeah. I think there's been some discussion about the DARPA program and whether we should bring some kind of DARPA program to Canada. I did participate in the DARPA program, the DARPA SPINS program years ago, so I'm somewhat familiar with the structure. I've also been a regular reviewer for DOE, and I actually think the DOE challenge programs are a little bit more suitable than DARPA, in the sense that DARPA tends to have a lot of control by very few people over the process, and maybe the calls are a little bit too narrow. I very much like the challenge programs that NRC has introduced. I think these are excellent programs, but I do think a lesson we can take from the US, which is different from what we're doing now, is the idea of a call for a certain topic, and I think we can do that in a way that works. I think the NRC challenge programs are a good example of that working.
Great, thank you, Dr. Hall, and I'm out of time. Thank you.
Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Thanks, Chair. Picking up where you left off, Professor Hall, the NRC has, through the challenge program, a unique way of spending public dollars to deliver on a particular outcome and encourage competition. The proposed national strategy has a budget allocation of $360 million. Now, some of that money has flowed. So this is for everyone, but let's start with you, Ms. Hall. So continuing challenge-like programs, the way the NRC has begun, is one way to spend those dollars. Would you have any other advice to the government in terms of how to best allocate the $360 million?
Yes, I do want to. I've sort of made this point during my speech, but the funding structure in Canada has evolved towards very large team grants like CREATE and like CFI Innovation Fund. And these programs are great and they have their purpose, but it's very important that because these large team structures leave out a lot of people in this Canada that are excellent scientists and just don't happen to be at the right university, for example, with a large number of people in a particular area or critical mass. People are sometimes not included in teams because of, unfortunately, diversity and bias that can sometimes enter it. So it's very important that if you want to fund the broad base of scientific strength in this country, that you also have open calls that are open to individuals and small teams, because these things will allow people to.
Thanks, Ms. Hall. And Professor Ghost, do you have anything to contribute in terms of how we ought to spend the $360 million over and above what Professor Hall's contributed?
Yes, I want to agree with the Professor Hall that right now this would be just adding to Alliance and create and these existing answer programs would actually be business as usual. And there is no evidence that these programs in the past have really led to including everybody who wants to contribute to this field to be able to do it. So I think that there has to be a rethinking, a reframing to build something that doesn't exist right now and also doesn't exist actually in any of these other countries in terms of programs that really can tap into all of the potential out there. And so that needs some research and bringing in people around these kinds of conversations, advisors who can talk about how to build a program that truly is inclusive. There are examples in other areas, but not yet in quantum.
Thanks. And Ms. Eperciel, do you have a view of how the government can best allocate $360 million via the national strategy?
In fact, I agree with what Professor Hall and Professor Gose said. I think that there is research. We need to have a balance between essential research, basic research and applied research to ensure that the issue of the adoption of quantum technologies be taken on in some way. Because if there are no users at the end of the process, it won't help. There's the whole issue also of supporting the entire ecosystem. An ecosystem is the businesses, the startups, the businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, the potential users. It's the funders. Olivier mentioned earlier the BDC with their fund, and that's also important. It's supporting everything that is leading-edge equipment. So is $360 million enough money? I wonder, because when we compare with others, it's not enough. There's the whole issue of intellectual property as well, and we have to support that properly so that the research developed here can be trademarked and patented and not go off to other countries very quickly. I know we have no time left.
Remaining time, same question, Mr. Gagnon-Gordillo, but you were nodding your head around entrepreneurship and supporting startups. So maybe speak to how the $360 million can be best allocated in that space.
Yeah, there's a lot of funds that are outside of that 360 as well, that is just all for research. But beyond the research, if you want to develop ecosystem and have those companies stay in Canada, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of tech transfer and making sure that there's a the adoption of quantum tech in companies. So we do have strong industrial sectors in Canada. So why don't we go with those strong industrial sectors? There are some that are different depending on the different provinces. In Quebec, we've identified 5 specific industries. We want to tackle those 5 industries. And then it's just a matter of let's find 1, 2, 3 champions and build from there. So this could be done with all the provinces and work with them and trying to find those early adopters that could become champions and then lead the way in terms of the adoption of quantum tech. And fund those projects.
I'm out of time, but it would be unfair, I think, Mr. Broussard, not to give you an opportunity if you have something to add.
Well, thank you, but frankly, I don't have much to add. I agree with all that was said, and I don't really have much to add to that, so I'll pass.
Well, thanks.
Thank you. So the witnesses...
Except perhaps I agree that it's not enough money, but it's a good start.
So the witnesses have witnessed how little authority I have on time management in this committee. But I want to thank you all. This was our last meeting with witnesses, and it was a really enlightening one. I think it's going to help us raise awareness about quantum computing in the months ahead. So,
une dernière question, monsieur.
I have a final question, Mr. Is teleportation ready anywhere in a store that what you invented? Not yet. No, you'll have to be patient for some time. But we know if somebody's going to invent it, Mr. Brassard, we know that it'll be you. Thank you for testifying, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the committee. This meeting is adjourned.